We're ready to debate on Bill C-411, and the honourable member for Mississauga, Brampton South, has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I get the opportunity today to speak on Bill C-411, an act to amend the Special Imports Measure Act on domestic prices. In the summary of the bill, Mr. Speaker, this enactment sets out the conditions required for deeming whether domestic prices in a country are substantially determined by the government of that country, and there is sufficient reason to believe that they are not substantially the same as they would be if they were determined in a competitive market. I understand the concerns and issues raised in this particular private member's bill, and I understand the spirit of this bill. I mean, it's really essentially targeting two specific areas. One is dumping practices, which I will talk about, and the other is the pressure on our domestic market, specifically manufacturing and forestry, I would say would be the two relevant sectors that feel, and textiles of course as well, that feel competition from imports, especially when it comes to our dumping practices in this country. Dumping is, as I said before, Mr. Speaker, is an anti-competitive practice that undermines domestic production. Dumping is a sale of a product for export at less than its normal value. Artificial price reduction is illegal under the World Trade Organization rules because it harms producers in the export market. This strategy also harms exporters of similar products in third countries because they are unable to compete with artificially cheap exports from the dumping country. So if Canada can show that a foreign exporter is dumping products on its market and that these imports could harm Canadian producers, it is entitled to impose anti-dumping measures such as charging an import duty to raise the price of a certain product to better reflect its actual value in accordance with the WTO law. Mr. Speaker, as I indicated, that is definitely a legitimate concern and something that we need to address. And I will allude to some of the concerns I have about this bill as well at the end, and specifically around the dumping practices. There are other concerns, as I mentioned early on, specifically in manufacturing and in the forestry sector. As you know, Mr. Speaker, the manufacturing sector alone represents 18% of the economic activity in Canada, and its contribution to wealth creation is even far greater than that percentage, Mr. Speaker. Since 2002, December 2002, up until November, statistics indicate that over 210,000 jobs have been lost in manufacturing alone. This is enormous pressure that is faced by our manufacturing sector, Mr. Speaker. And it's really something that we need to address. And what bothers me profoundly, Mr. Speaker, is that this current government is pursuing very aggressively trade negotiations with the South Koreans and are putting in place a trade deal that would effectively further compound job losses in the manufacturing sector. I can't understand why this government would pursue such an initiative. They want to, in effect, create jobs in lower value-added areas that pay less, that have less benefits, and we would lose out high value-added Canadian jobs, Mr. Speaker. This is something that really concerns me. There's other issues with respects to South Korea regarding non-tariff barriers that need to be addressed in that trade agreement that hasn't been addressed thus far by the minister, and we haven't had proper debate and discussion on that, but we are working thoroughly in committee to address these concerns, and hopefully that will shed some light on these very important issues. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, it's about families. When a person loses a job, he or she not only loses a job, but in effect compromises their own family's position. It's a loss of income. It has a direct impact on their communities, and this is something that needs to be addressed as well. So not only have we lost these jobs, but we are fundamentally shifting the landscape of our country with respect to the economic outlook going forward. The other area of concern, Mr. Speaker, the other sector that is obviously under a tremendous amount of pressure as well in our economy is the forestry sector. Not too long ago, this government signed a very flawed deal, one that's referred to as the softwood sellout, which I think would be deemed appropriate. This deal particularly has questioned our sovereignty when it comes to forestry policies, Mr. Speaker. By signing this deal, we left $1 billion on the table, a substantial amount. It was a broken promise by this government. They've committed to collecting the full amount of the tariffs, and they only collected 80 cents to the dollar, Mr. Speaker, leaving $1 billion on the table. They threw out all our WTO and NAFTA rulings right out the door, Mr. Speaker, and to settle for a deal that puts quotas on and charges higher tariff rates to our industry here in Canada. And as you can see in the forestry sector, every day when you read the newspapers, every day you look at the business section, you hear of companies closing, mills closing, people losing jobs. Again, this is not simply a matter of jobs, Mr. Speaker, it affects families and communities, and this has a rippling effect across our country and our economy. Not only is there a concern of a particular job loss, but many of these jobs, specifically if you take the auto sector, have 7 to 8 spin-off jobs that are lost as well because they're directly correlated with that initial job. So, Mr. Speaker, there's thousands of jobs being lost in manufacturing, in forestry, and so I can understand this private member's bill's intent is to really make sure that our economy avoids dumping practices and also avoids the unfair pressure to our manufacturing sector and to forestry sectors and to the textile sectors and other very important key industries in our economy, Mr. Speaker. As I indicated before, that I did have some reservations and concerns about this particular bill. This bill, as I said, seeks to codify the conditions used to determine if an export monopoly exists in a given country. And it does this by outlining 5 conditions that, if any were not met, would automatically result in a country being deemed to have an export monopoly, Mr. Speaker. So this act is redundant and seeks to tell the President of the Canada Border Service Agency how to do their job. The President of CBSA is one who currently makes this determination. The categories, in my opinion, are broad and could conceivably result in almost any country being designated as having an export monopoly. And this includes the United States and the European Union, which the CBSA already relies on to determine quote-unquote normal market practices. This again impairs the ability of the CBSA and the Canadian International Trade Tribunal to do their jobs. So there are legitimate concerns we have, Mr. Speaker, and the concerns that this bill purports to address can already be the concerns that this bill wants to address can be dealt through a variety of mechanisms, including existing trade agreements that we have in place presently, as well as trade tribunals. These issues are better addressed during trade negotiations, and the Liberal Party, Mr. Speaker, has always advocated for trade agreements which seek a fair balance, free and fair trade. We've done so, we've demonstrated presently in our discussions with the, as I said before, with the South Korea free trade negotiations. Our concern is we are a party of free trade. We have a long history of promoting free and fair trade, Mr. Speaker. And if you look at the trade negotiations with South Korea, our concern genuinely relies or is revolved around market access. We want to make sure that Canadian product has a level playing field to be sold in South Korea. We don't want their product to come into our market and have our companies and our hardworking Canadians have difficulty selling our product into their market. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a legitimate concern that we have, and this is something that I believe that this is the concern that's being addressed. So I can understand, Mr. Speaker, as I said in my remarks, that there are some concerns that we had around C411. I can see that some members in the House are very energetic about this bill. I've again addressed the concerns with this bill, Mr. Speaker, and I will again remind the members that are listening that we have reservations and concerns. Like we said, this bill seeks to codify the conditions used to determine if any export monopoly exists in a given country, and it does this by outlining 5 conditions that, if were not met, would automatically result in a country being deemed to have an export monopoly. So we've expressed our concerns, Mr. Speaker, about this bill. We understand the spirit and the intent of this bill. We understand the pressures that are currently undertaken in our economy from dumping practices. We've alluded and explained the process around the dumping practices concerns, but there is a system in place, Mr. Speaker, to address this. We feel that this particular bill is too simple and doesn't have the wording and the mechanism in place to properly address the concerns that have been raised by some members, Mr. Speaker. So, as we've said before, the Liberal Party understands the concerns, and we feel that they can be addressed through trade agreements and through trade tribunals, Mr. Speaker, and that's something that the Liberal Party has supported as a party of free and fair trade, Mr. Speaker, and we look forward to discussion on this bill on an ongoing forward basis. Thank you very much.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Hamilton East Stony Creek.